Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy snowy Saturday. I don't really mind snow this time of year, because I know that in a couple of days, it's going to melt away and I won't have to worry about it anymore. But I really wish that we would have had this snow a couple of months ago. Though I suppose we should be thankful for what we've been given. Unless, of course, it comes to redcoats. Boy, are they coming out of the woodwork now, aren't they? It's almost like there's a constant stream from the Wyoming bureaucracy to the ballot box. Every time I turn around, there's another insider that says they're running for office. The one I saw this morning was our old pal Luke Reiner, the former director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is that name so funny to you, David? Why do you find it so amusing? That's because it comes from one of my favorite early episodes, Luke Reiner's Road to Nowhere. During Luke Reiner's tenure at the Wyoming Department of Transportation, he was the rocket scientist behind the plan to put electric vehicle charging stations every 50 miles on all of Wyoming's interstates. Now, that may not seem like that bad of an idea if you actually own an electric vehicle. After all, there are gas stations for gas-powered vehicles. Why not electric charging stations for electric vehicles? That just makes perfect sense, right? Well, maybe, if you're the head of a giant bureaucracy and if you don't think about it very much. And I suppose it would also help if you didn't do a lot of math. Evidently, Luke Reiner didn't do any of those things. Because at the time, Luke Reiner traveled the state trying to convince Wyoming citizens that this whole thing was a really good idea. And what could possibly go wrong with it anyway? The federal government was funding the whole thing. 2022 was right in the middle of the Biden administration, and all of the money for Luke Reiner's EV charging stations was coming from the Biden administration's plan to build them everywhere. The plan was so ambitious that the Biden administration spent $7.5 billion on it, and Luke Reiner wanted to get us right in the middle of it. Unfortunately, 2 years after that whole plan was signed into law by Joe Biden, according to a 2024 news article from AutoWeek, they only built 8 EV charging stations. Not 800, not 8,000, not even 80,000. 8 for $7.5 billion. But back in 2022, Luke Reiner thought this was a great idea. In April of 2022, actually, April 2nd of 2022, I published an episode about this whole thing entitled Luke Reiner's Road to Nowhere. At the time, I got a lot of feedback on this episode from people asking whether or not it was actually one of my April Fool's Day gags. My response to all of them was, I really wish it were an April Fool's Day joke, but unfortunately, the director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation, Luke Reiner, actually proposed this idiotic idea. Here's an excerpt from that episode, April 2nd, 2022, Luke Reiner's Road to Nowhere.
To the Cowpie, in an article entitled Wyoming Working to Develop Network of Electric Vehicle Charging Stations, published on March 30th, Jim Angle writes, quote, State officials are working on a plan to use federal money to encourage private companies to build a network of high-speed electric vehicle recharging stations along the state's interstate highways. First question, why doesn't that network of charging stations already exist? Simple answer, class, because there's not a need in the market for it. Back to the article. Quote, although Wyoming has one of the lowest ownership rates for electric vehicles in the nation, it needs to build up its infrastructure for the vehicles to provide those needs for those traveling to or through the state, says Luke Reiner, director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation. Quote, "The focus is on electric vehicles being purchased by people around the nation who we know want to come to Wyoming as tourists," he told the Cowboy State Daily on Wednesday. "We want to make sure the infrastructure exists to get them from point A to point B," end quote. My first question is, who hired this guy? Second, this is a perfect example of the government trying to create a need in the market that doesn't exist. The next paragraph shows you exactly why the director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation shouldn't have been hired in the first place. And I quote, "According to a draft study prepared for the plan, there are 456 registered electric cars and light trucks in Wyoming, along with 11 electric motorcycles or multi-purpose vehicles in the state. That amounts to less than 1/10 of 1% of the more than 653,000 non-commercial vehicles in the state," end quote. So wait a minute. We're either building a network of electric charging stations along all of Wyoming's interstates, that means all along I-80, all along I-25, and all along I-90 at 50-mile intervals for 456 vehicles, or B, we're building said network of electric charging stations for people that don't even live in this state, and we have no idea if they're actually going to bring their electric vehicles to the state on vacation. Let me just posit a theory on this one. The reason why we don't have electric charging stations littered across the highways and byways of the great state of Wyoming is there isn't a need for them. I think that Luke Reiner, the director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation, has mistakenly punched his time card at the Wyoming Business Council. You see, that's the proper outfit for spending taxpayer money when there's absolutely no need for it.
I had totally forgotten about the Wyoming Business Council comment. But like I said, the entire idea is really pretty stupid, which is why Luke Reiner abandoned the whole plan. Well, that's not entirely accurate. Essentially, he got told no. Today's edition of Cowboy State Politics is brought to you by Morton Buildings. Despite what you might think, this is still a Wyoming spring. If I had to guess, I would say that we've probably still got one more good snowstorm to go. And I know that you thought that all of your stuff was done being snowed on for the year. This is Wyoming, Jack. You got snow when you least expect it. Though you have to go through it, it's a really good reminder why you should call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. They'll set you up with a building that'll fit any of your needs. Just think about it. You can get your toys out when it's 60 and 70 degrees, put them back in the building, and then just let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Call Marcos and Jesse. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best at metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So one more time, that phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com.
Are you watching what's happening in our country and asking, what can I do? Join the John Birch Society in Salt Lake City, June 6th, for a powerful one-day conference. The day includes a host of respected speakers, 2 meals, and meaningful connections. You'll gain clarity on the issues and walk away with practical steps you can take to your community. Reserve your seat today at jbs.org/SLC26. That's jbs.org/SLC26.
The following ad is paid for by Brent Bean for governor. You ever get tired of all the flashy campaign materials, the really well-done commercials, or not so well done, that are played over and over and over when all you're trying to do is watch a baseball game? As you can tell, I totally get it. If you just want to talk to a candidate like normal people do, Brent Bean, who's running for governor, makes it really, really easy. Here's a couple of chances that you can go meet with him. Here's a couple of his upcoming appearances. This upcoming weekend at the Republican Party State Convention, he'll be there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday all day long. There's plenty of opportunities to talk to him. On April 30th, he's going to have town halls in Shell and Grable, and that evening he'll be in Lovell. Then on May 1st, he has Jimmy Rush Music with Brent Bean. That's going to be held at Brugard's in Cody. And then on May 2nd, he'll have a town hall in Powell, and later on that evening, a fundraiser in Cody. Go to the Facebook page, Brent Bean for Governor, for more information. And now, back to the program. From a 2023 piece in Politico entitled Wyoming Bucks Biden on Electric Vehicles, and I quote, "The bipartisan infrastructure law of 2021 allocated $7.5 billion over 5 years for states to build out charging stations for electric cars. The administration is requiring those stations to be located every 50 miles, largely along highways, so drivers feel confident that they won't get stranded. Them's the rules." But the thing about Wyoming is it's huge and sparsely populated. The state says building and maintaining a charging station every 50 miles would require vast resources with little payoff. Only about 500 people in the entire state own electric vehicles. Wyoming crunched the numbers and projected that the charging stations the administration wants wouldn't be profitable until the 2040s. And since the federal funding only lasts 5 years, the state doesn't want to be saddled with a massive bill for over a decade. Quote, "Wyoming has no desire to establish infrastructure that will likely fail," the state told the federal office overseeing the charging network effort. End quote. Really, what happened is Luke Reiner held a series of town halls across the state to allow for public comment, and the overwhelming consensus was, this is a stupid idea. And now, that same guy wants to run for the Wyoming House of Representatives in Laramie County's House District 8, which is essentially North Cheyenne. From a particularly bloated puff piece in the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, entitled "Former WYDOT Director Reiner Announces Bid for Wyoming House," he says, and I quote, "I think that's a unique thing to understand how government works, to have been involved in running government, and to be involved in the legislative process." I think what he really meant to say was attempting to run government into the ground. Luke Reiner is also the source of the claim that the Wyoming Department of Transportation is hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole. When he was first appointed by Mark Gordon to be the director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation, he claimed that at that time, WYDOT had a $135 million shortfall. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we still have a Wyoming Department of Transportation. We still have state troopers patrolling the interstates and highways. We still have snowplow drivers. And unless I'm entirely mistaken, there really are only 2 seasons in Wyoming, winter and construction. Really, what bureaucrats like Luke Reiner mean when they say that there's a budget shortfall is they don't have enough money to do all of the things that they want to do. Not that they need to do, that they want to do. Shortly after he took over the Wyoming Department of Transportation, Reiner conducted a study using outside consultants that determined that the Wyoming Department of Transportation didn't have a $135 million shortfall. It was actually closer to $400 million. Today, that figure has ballooned to $600 million. All the while, the Wyoming Department of Transportation still functions, they still have highway patrolmen, and they still fix roads during the summer. Just to say that you have a budget shortfall doesn't really mean anything. The only thing it means is that you don't have enough money to do all of the things that you want to do. And the claim serves as a pretty good political football. Back to the fawning piece in the Turkey Vulture. Right at the end, quote, "As he prepares for the Republican primary on August 18th, Reiner's campaign strategy centers on direct engagement. He plans to spend the coming months knocking on doors and meeting constituents in their neighborhoods. Rather than leading with a fixed agenda, Reiner says his initial goal is to listen." Isn't that just the word that every candidate likes to use? And they often deliver it with a grave and serious look on their face. I'm going to listen to my constituents. Now, while I will agree that that is something that politicians don't do a whole lot of, this is also the phrase that allows a candidate to be a political chameleon. If you don't have any ideas of your own while you're campaigning, well, then there's nothing you can be held accountable to. I'm just listening. I'm not really campaigning on anything. I'm just going to nod my head and smile to whatever it is that you tell me. Just sounds great, doesn't it? Well, here's the other side of this whole thing. Luke Reiner is just another in a long string of bureaucrats that have announced they're running for public office. That is, people who have been involved in government in unelected positions for a really long time. People that spend your money without ever being accountable to voters. Another one of these is Chad Auer, He's running for state superintendent of public instruction. For a couple of years, he's been an education policy advisor to Governor Gordon. Both of these guys have experience in working for the governor, not having to run for public office, and yet being able to influence public policy from behind the scenes. Even though now Luke Reiner is running for the House of Representatives, and he says that he's going to listen to his constituents, his experience working for the Department of Transportation is actually the opposite of that. Admittedly, it's been a while since Luke Reiner's been running the show at WYDOT, but you got to look at what they did while they were in those positions. But there are a lot of people that are running for office this year that have been on boards and claim that that gives them some experience into running the government for you. Don't listen to what they say, look at what they did. And I'll do my best to find out who these people are for you. Well, that'll about do it for today's installment of Weekend Update. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday. Later today, the lovely Christine and I are going to Gillette to watch Kyle Mann from the Babylon Bee. The Campbell County Republican women have brought him to town for an evening of fun and laughs, and you might still be able to get tickets for it. Go to campbellcountyrepublicanwomen.com, and if you buy a ticket, I'll see you there. For now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.